Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks. Fake questions, real answers. Stuff I want to talk about, but don't want to wait for you to ask me the questions. Dear Colin, why does there seem like such a big gap between the best quarterbacks and the other ones? And it's been expanded in the last few years. Good question. And to answer that, I would think about the game show Jeopardy. There used to be a rule on Jeopardy for most of its existence. You could only win a week, 5 games. And that would usually mean you win about $100,000. And you could clearly tell the difference between really, really good people that could win an entire week and bad contestants. But you really couldn't delineate the difference between somebody that was smart and like maybe a genius. Then they got rid of that rule. And Ken Jennings won 74 straight games. The human computer, James Holzhauer, won 32 in a row and $2.5 million. When you subtracted the limitations on the number of games you could win, you could now see a huge difference between smart and genius. Same in the NFL. We could always tell for years the difference between, a great quarterback, Peyton Manning, and a good one in Bernie Kosar. But in 2005, Carson Palmer led the league with 32 passing touchdowns. Peyton had 28. Brady, third with 26. They were all sort of bunched together, though we know Brady is the all-time great. But in the NFL, they have relaxed so many of those offensive rules. You can get away with more. They've been more restrictive on defensive rules. Suddenly, you now have guys throwing for 40 and 50 touchdowns. The gap between good Matt Ryan and great Aaron Rodgers is not yards or feet, it's miles. In fact, you hear people say things like, man, this looks so easy for Aaron Rodgers. Just like Ken Jennings, the gap between Ken and somebody who could win a week, you didn't really see it, although maybe you suspected he was smarter. The gap now between Aaron Rodgers and an offensive-driven league in Matt Ryan looks like the Grand Canyon. That's why it feels like the NFL is feast or famine with quarterback play. Dear Colin, what's the best memory of John Madden you've heard people discuss in the past few days? Well, there's a difference between great and an icon. And let me try to explain it. John was so ubiquitous, so fantastic, so relevant for 5 decades that you can't really boil his career down to one coaching moment or one broadcasting moment or one video game moment. Same with Johnny Carson. He had so many decades of groundbreaking shows, you can't boil it down. There are plenty of people, plenty of celebrities who have had a great show, a great movie or 2 or 3, or a highlight. The difference between Carson and John Madden, you can't boil their career down to a moment. Dear Colin, do you think Mike McCarthy will take heat, or Dak will take heat, if they lose early in the playoffs? It's an interesting question. Let's first address early in the playoffs. Let's give Dallas one playoff win. They will host their first round playoff game. So let's say they beat a Philadelphia, beat a San Francisco, whoever is near the bottom of the NFC playoff picture. But remember, we generally don't blame an athlete if they lose to a greater athlete. We don't blame a coach if they lose to Belichick or Andy Reid. This is where Mike McCarthy and Dak could get a little bit of a pass if they at least win one playoff round. If they lost to Tom Brady, it would be understandable. Or Aaron Rodgers, it would be understandable. Or Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, for Dak, that would be understandable. The truth is, after the first round, it's likely the Cowboys are an underdog. If Andy Reid loses, people will start talking about, this is it for Patrick Mahomes? Back-to-back years, can't cap off the season? Those clock management issues will creep back in because he's got Mahomes and he's got a better roster than all but maybe one or two teams in the league. McCarthy and Dak are not considered the best coach or quarterback going into the NFC playoffs. In fact, many would put them 4 of 4 in terms of division winners. Dear Colin, it's been a month since Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for USC, and their fans are still chirping about it. Why? So glad you asked. There's a truism in life that most of us will eventually get dumped. A boss will fire us. A girl will dump us. And we've all been vulnerable, let go, dumped, and fired. But let's say you were the high school quarterback and you looked like George Clooney or Denzel in high school, and you did the dumping. And then you went to college and you were a Division I athlete, and again, you did the dumping. And then you start dating as you are a pro athlete maybe, and somebody dumps you. Well, you've never experienced it, and it's very painful. Oklahoma's never been dumped. They've always controlled the firings, firing basketball coaches, football coaches, John Blake, firing coordinators. The university has never had this experience. Lincoln Riley not only left them, not for the Dallas Cowboys, but for another top 5 to 10 college football program. That stings. If you've never been dumped, it hurts. And in communities like Norman, Oklahoma, or Morgantown, West Virginia, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the local university is not only the emotional centerpiece, but it's often the biggest component to a local economy, everybody's connected. Everybody is so emotionally invested in Oklahoma football. And Lincoln Riley eventually said, hey, I'm out of here. And that never happened before. By the way, USC fans won't get emotional. John Robinson left USC for the NFL. Pete Carroll left USC for the NFL. Also, Los Angeles is a market that's got multiple options. It's got distractions like the mountains and the beach. It's got 2 NBA teams, 2 NFL teams, 2 soccer teams, a couple of hockey teams, the Dodgers. So if a coach dumps you, you move on to another team. That's why when Pete Carroll left USC, they weren't bitter. But in the small towns in America where the university is the fabric, whenever somebody leaves them, here's always the chorus. It's not that they left, it's how they left. No, bro. She dumped your ass. And when it happens for the first time, it stings. Dear Colin, did you hear Kyrie Irving say he wasn't prepared for the consequences of not getting the vaccine? Yes, I heard that. He said he knew the consequences, but wasn't prepared for them. Isn't part of knowing the consequences being prepared for the consequences? Listen, if you and I got into a fight 10 years ago with Mike Tyson, we would be prepared for the consequences, that our entire face could be caved in. Kyrie Irving's one of the top 5 to 7 stars in the league. He was part of a big 3 on a marquee team in Brooklyn. If he couldn't see all of this coming, maybe Kyrie Irving's not quite as bright as he wants us to believe. It's sort of like when he said the earth is flat. Well, you do realize that for most of us, if anybody in our social circle ever said during a conversation, Colin, I was thinking about this. I think the earth is flat. My response would be, check, please. Kyrie is trying to give off the vibe that he's ethereal and thoughtful. The deeper you look, there's not much there.